Hello again and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about environment variables. We talked about these in the first class, but we haven't really dealt with them much since then. So I want to reintroduce them, and then we're going to go through some specific environment variables and how you can use them for your different analyses. So first, we're going to take a look at what environment variables are, and then we'll look at a specific one, a really simple one for this video, but then we'll move into more advanced ones in the next couple of videos. So let's bring up a tool, and I'll bring up the zonal statistics as table tool for now. And I'm not going to focus on these parameters, but remember that a tool has many parameters. We have our input parameters and our output parameters. Now, environment variables sit at the bottom here, and if I click on this, I get a whole listing of additional items in groups, and they're basically just the same as geoprocessing tool parameters, except even though I access them here, in general an environment setting is overarching. It affects the entire analysis environment, and that's where it gets its name. What we can think of them as is parameters to geoprocessing tools that are common and may have some sensible defaults. So they're common enough that they apply to many different tools, and we want to standardize them to a single input variable in the environment settings. And ArcGIS sets the default values for many of them because it needs these across a broad range of tools. This necessity across the broad range of tools lends itself to the environment settings hierarchical model, where I can set it there, but I can also set it in the geoprocessing environments menu. And if I set them from that pane, which looks identical, it applies to any geoprocessing tool I open within this map document. It's sort of it's a semi-permanent setting. It's not like a ArcMap option, but it's a setting that applies for the entire scope of this map document whenever I open up a new geoprocessing tool. But when I set the environment settings from down here, within a tool, it applies just for that run of that particular tool, and then it reverts back to the defaults that are available in the geoprocessing environments menu. So there are many different environment settings. There are the workspace settings, which we'll look at in just a moment. You could set the coordinate system that an analysis is done in and the data is output in, the extent to process, so the geographical area that should be processed, as well as a snap raster, which we'll go over later in this lesson, the XY resolution and tolerance for coordinates, whether or not the coordinates should have M values, which are for routing, Z values for 3D information, some information about how it sets up geodatabases, some information about how it works with fields, random number generator information, cartography settings, more on coverages, rasters, and even more and more. Now, what's not important is for you to memorize all of these. You'll get used to the ones that apply to your work as you continue on using GIS. I'll tell you that the ones that apply to my work most often are the raster analysis settings, the output coordinate settings, and the processing extent settings. But you may find yourself using some of these other ones based upon your particular workflows and things that are important in your discipline. And while I do usually advocate for you having a good sense for what's available to you so that you can make proper choices and have those tools in your mind to solve problems, the environment settings kind of show you what's available to you all the time. Because if I'm looking at a tool help wondering how to work with the zonal statistics tool, I can see which environment settings apply to it. So down at the bottom, these are all the environments it obeys. It does not obey all environments. It'll ignore plenty of them that don't apply to the type of analysis it's doing. But it will tell me the ones it obeys, and if I'm looking at one and thinking, snap raster sounds like maybe something I might want, but I'm not sure, I can click on it and it takes me to the information about the snap raster. You can also access all that information in the help that's online. And just to demonstrate the difference there, that tool, the zonal statistics as table tool, had many different environment settings it obeyed. But if I look at the extract multi-values to points tool and go to tool help, I will see it doesn't obey many environments. It has just 6 here, whereas zonal statistics as table had 2 full lines of environments it looked at. And that's because they're doing different kinds of work, and the environments may or may not apply, or they may not have enabled them for these tools. Okay, and to demonstrate, let's take a look at an environment setting in action here. So continuing on with the zonal statistics tool, if I select my input features here, which are parcels, it automatically sets an output table for me. And notice that it's in my user directory and under Documents, ArcGIS, and my default geodatabase. And then it gives it a name. Well, let's cancel this out. And that's derived from the default geodatabase set in the map document properties. But what that actually does is the default geodatabase becomes an environment setting. And that environment setting is the current and Scratch workspaces, which are slightly different, but let's set those to a new thing now. I'm going to set them to a default geodatabase that I have in my working directory for this course. And I'll click Add, and I'll set both the current and Scratch workspaces here. Basically, each of these is a default place for ArcGIS to store working products. The Scratch workspace is used most commonly in model builder models, and it's a place for intermediate products you don't want to keep. But it also affects whether or not the current workspace is used at all. So we're going to define both of them. And the current workspace is really what we want to define our output locations to basically act as our default geodatabase setting. And when I click OK, it's going to set it for the whole map document, as I said, since I did it from the Geoprocessing Environments window. And now, if I go back down to Zonal Statistics as Table, and I set that parcels layer again as my input, it is now putting it in my folder for this course in that default geodatabase I set, and it still auto-generates a name. So that environment setting affected all tools, and if I was really interested, I could use the Extract Values to Points tool just to see if it's going to do the same thing. So I'll select my sample locations, and in fact, yeah, it did affect this tool too. This tool does not use the same location as it did originally. It uses the new location I set in the environment settings. So as I said, an environment setting is basically a parameter to these geoprocessing tools, but it's also a parameter that can be used by the other logic and parameters in the tools. Or on the backside, once you run the tool, it can affect it there, which is what the parameters or the environment settings that I'll show you in the next few videos will do. Okay, that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, I showed you what an environment setting is as review from the first course, and then we used the current and Scratch workspace environments to demonstrate an environment setting that affects the entire map document and affects specific tools that we run within the map document. In the next lecture, I'll show you the output coordinate system environment variable that has much larger implications for our data analysis and is a really important one to be aware of. It'll dovetail nicely with the work we did on projections recently and will help bring home how that matters in your analysis. See you there.